Good day and welcome back to the Age of Reform in the United States around the age of 1820 to 1860. Now this is the third part in our three-part series. In our first part we talked about the history of the Age of Reform. We concentrated on the religious movements, in particular the Great Awakening and the Second Great Awakening. And in part two we talked about educational reform, in particular about the abolitionist movement towards slavery and the freeing of people of color, and about women's rights and the temperance movement, the trying to get rid of or the abstinence of alcohol. In our part 3 video today, we're going to finish up that series by looking once again at the religious movement, in particular in the Age of Reform, towards the utopian societies, what went right and what went wrong. And we'll start off with the word cult. What is a cult? What was going on with these societies? When we start off with one of the earliest ones with religious reform, we're starting with the Shakers. Now that is with Anne Lee in 1774. Now the Shakers used dancing as a worship practice. This was very unconventional in a Christian type of religion. The Shakers also practiced celibacy, which separates the sexes as far as practically possible. The Shakers also worked hard, lived simply. A lot of times when you had the Shakers making an economic wage, it was building furnitures. And they also impressed outsiders with their cleanliness and their order. However, because they practiced celibacy, they lacked any natural increase. And so their membership began to decline after 1850 from a peak of about 6,000 members. So we talk about the beginning with Mother Anne Lee and the Shakers. Some of her ideals in her reform were, if you will take up your crosses against the works of generations and follow Christ in the regeneration, God will cleanse you from all unrighteousness. She also wrote, remember the cries of those who are in need and trouble, that when you are in trouble, God may hear your cries. And if you improve in one talent, God will give you more. And so again, when we take a look at the artwork, there's always good artwork in the Age of the Reform movement. One of the Shaker meetings, one of the times we see them meeting in a society for the religious aspect, we see the women on one side and the men on the other, and here they are dancing. You will also notice that we have a lot of different members of society. Not only do we have some wealthier women just sitting out the dance and just observing, you can also see in the background of the male section, you have an African American. Now, of course, since you're going to be dancing, there's also going to be singing, and one of the Shaker hymns is, "'Tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free, 'tis the gift to come down where you ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right." Now, of course, the Shakers were not the only utopian societies that there were out there. We also see several others forming, and some of them that we'll talk about today are the Oneida Community, Brook Farm, New Harmony, and there will be several utopian societies that are formed by the Transcendentalists. Now, when it comes to secular and not religious utopian communities, they have two stresses. One is the stressing for individual freedom. The Transcendentalists were very key on this, where you have this sense of self-fulfillment. If you work hard, you will succeed. There's also that sense of spontaneity. You're going to get up in the morning and you're going to decide, I'm going to go off for a walk in the woods, and that's what I'm going to do all day. I'm not going to work a 9-to-5 job because that is what life or economics expects of me. You're also in secular utopian communities going to have the demands of the community life, in which there has to be some sense of discipline. After all, people are going to need to work. Somebody needs to work the post office in your community. Somebody needs to farm the lands. Somebody needs to also be in charge. So there needs to be an organizational hierarchy. So even though there's this sense of individual freedom, Somebody has to still be in charge. So let's start with the United Community in New York of 1848 with John Humphrey Noyes. Now, he started with the idea of millenarianism, which is the second coming of Christ, has already happened. It had already occurred. And so therefore, humans were no longer obliged to follow the moral rules of the past. And so in the idea of the United Community, all residents are married to each other. In other words, it's a carefully regulated free love movement. We're also going to see Brook Farm being formed in West Roxbury, Massachusetts by George Ripley. Now, the Transcendentalists have this central idea of liberation or freedom from understanding and by cultivating of reasoning. Well, what does that mean? Well, to transcend means to rise above the limits of intellect and allow your emotions or your soul to create an original relationship with the universe. And notice universe is capitalized. If you want to think of it as a divine being, nature, whatever you define that original relationship with, allow your emotions and soul to rise above and create a relationship with that universe. Now, the Transcendentalist intellectuals basically came from Concord, Massachusetts. The two Transcendentalist writers that we usually see being relied upon Transcendentalism are Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. And a lot of their famous works, such as Emerson's Nature, Self-Reliance, and The American Scholar, are quoted, as well as Henry David Thoreau's Resistance to Civil Disobedience and Walden. We also have Robert Owen's Utopian Socialist Society, which was, in his mind, the village of cooperation. And so you're going to see his village of cooperation coming into being in New Harmony, Indiana. Now, he had drawn up this original plan, as you can see, of it being almost this fortress-like looking set of homes and towers. Of course, New Harmony does become built, but it looks more like you'd expect a village where you have some centralized organizational government-type building or a church with farms and small homes around it. And today, you could still go visit parts of New Harmony, Indiana, just to get a sense of what a utopian community used to look like. You do still have the David Lenz house with the bake oven in it. There's still also the New Harmony Inn, one of the bigger homes that would have been built at the time. And they still have a sense of a labyrinth there built for our visitors to check out as well. So experimental communities, utopians, these seem to be quite odd. Were there just the four? No. During the 1820s to 1860, there were dozens made, and all across the United States, in particularly usually in the North, but there were some in the South as well. Now, a lot of them had a religious bent to them, but there were several secular societies as well, and so you can see the different ones being represented by the key. Thanks so much for watching and learning more about the Age of Reform. If you have other questions about the Age of Reform, say more questions about the Second Awakening, or you'd like more particular videos on temperance or on women's rights movements, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what else you'd like to learn. And as always, thanks for watching.